Welcome back to the big story right here on KTN News. On a day, President Uhuru Kenyatta has nominated a former Kenya Power CEO Ben Chumo for appointment as SRC chair. He has also nominated Meru Woman Representative Florence Kajuju, Washington Opio and Lucy Ndungu for appointment as members of the Commission on Administrative Justice, well known as Ombudsman. So we've already discussed in detail with regards to the Commission on Administrative Justice. Let's now change focus to the Salaries and Remuneration Commission and whether Chumo is the right person for that position. In studio, still have Professor Alfred Omenya, who is the CEO of EcoBuild Africa. Also have Dr. Duncan Ojwang, who is a lecturer at Nazarene University, and Ruth Obongo is the founder of Young Kenya Women Leaders. Now, Professor Alfred, let me begin with you again. Salaries and Remuneration Commission, it's a very unpopular position, as I've already mentioned. Do you think Mr. Chumo has all it takes?
Well, I think I'll have to be unpopular on this one again. It's also a no for me.
Yes.
And it is a no for me because this is a huge and very important position in this country. What do I mean? I think currently the three major issues that the President of the Republic is trying to grapple with is the issue of debt. And then it is the issue of unsustainable wage bill. If you're looking at 54% of our budget going to pay salaries, and of course the entire thing was never cleaned up by the SRC team. Nothing has been harmonized in terms of public sector payments. Our development partners, IFC, World Bank, everybody is saying, look here, this is totally unsustainable. And whom do you propose to fix it? You propose somebody who only had one job at KPLC, for goodness sake, and doubled the debt while he was there.
So are you saying no because of the scope of work or because of his track record?
I think he doesn't have what it takes in terms of his experience. I don't think he has a track record to be able to streamline the salaries in the country. I really just don't think that he has what it takes to get the job done. Right.
Now, Dr. Duncan, this is an individual who's taking up this position at a time when members of parliament are stepping up, efforts to increase their perks and their salaries. So do you think he's the right person for this job?
It's little known to me, but I want to analogize with Ms. Serem. Nobody knew Ms. Serem until she got this job. But I think after Ms. Serem got the job, she was able to withstand all the pressure and do fairly good. Ms. Serem was able to do that. So I'm not sure about this gentleman. I think his CV is not voluminous, as Professor is suggesting, that is for sure. But so was Ms. Serem, and she fairly did a good job. But allow me to just look at all this appointment together, and even what Professor said on Tiendo Mola. I wasn't saying that this thing needs somebody who cadres the government. I was saying that it requires somebody who can pressure the government, and pressure can come from even from within, not necessarily by banging the table. And I think we are being disingenuous. Even the former ombudsman, Otiende Molo, because Otiende Molo knows the structure of appointment of ombudsman. He's a member of parliament. He has not even cared to change it. The president appoints the panel. There is no criteria on where that panel comes from. There is no qualification of who should be in the panel. And that panel, the outcome is obvious. So when he's now saying that I don't know the selection panel, yet he's the parliamentarian, and he knows that the law that selects this panel are appointed by the president without any caution on who can sit in that panel for selection, then he's being disingenuous. Finally, on the issue of even gender, I think that we're underrating, one, we turn gender to be a feminist issue. So gender equals women. I don't think so. And then we use the term gender to underrate women's intelligence. You can't tell me that if I go and pick two women in my village, then just because they are women, then there is fairness. And it's a decoy for tribal appointment or lack of it. It is a decoy for lack of balancing our country, so that women are supposed to now just check, and as long as I have a fellow woman, then we should be happy all along. I think this
Dr. Jwang, I think that's a whole new debate. For now, let's stick to SRC and the individual who's been appointed, who has been nominated to take up this position. And let me bring Ruth into this conversation. Of course, she represents the youth and women. Ruth, feel free to react to what Dr. Jwang said, but I'd like you to react to this specifically. With regards to Mr. Chumo's nomination as to the helm of SRC, there are those on social media saying, you know, the president is basically recycling old guards.
I would actually definitely agree with them, because first and foremost, we need to understand that when his term ended as the managing director for Kenya Power, there was a proposal for his term to be renewed, and the court actually suspended his proposal for the term renewal because he had reached the age limit of basically retiring. So that's where the question of whether the old guys are being recycled, and I would like to agree with those who say that yes, indeed, there is a recycling of old guys coming in, and whether as to the question as to whether he actually qualifies to hold that position. I think the question is not does he really qualify to hold the position, but the question is, will he be able to handle the pressure that comes from parliamentarians? Because during the period of time that Sarah Serem held the position, most of the times what was evident was there used to be wrangles between her and the parliamentarians as regards their salary increments. Right now we are seeing parliamentarians saying they want their salaries increased. Is he going to be in a position to be able to handle this pressure? And remember that the parliamentarian salary contributes a great percentage to the wage bill of this country. At the moment, our wage bill is taking over. The wage bill of this country is actually consuming 55% of our national revenue. We are having a situation whereby our wage bill is increasing and the revenues aren't increasing. So the question is, will he be able to handle this situation whereby there's pressure from parliamentarians and there's the need to have development agendas of the country met, you know? So that's the question. And to me, as regards the question of whether there's a recycling of old guys, definitely he's 60. I believe there are younger guys out there who could be able to hold this position. And going by his track record at Kenya Power, the common Mwananchi will tell you that we have suffered under Kenya Power lately. So going by his track record of you know, Kenyans receiving ridiculous bills and so many questions that have arisen from Kenya Power's management, I don't think he qualifies. So I would agree with Professor on that. Yes.
Now, let me bring Prof once again to this conversation. Prof, now, with regards to the track record that we've talked about, where does this leave the war on corruption? Does it show seriousness from, you know, the man on the helm of this country?
Well, I think these actions are totally uninspiring, really, if you're to ask me. Kenyans are talking every day about corruption. Kenyans are talking about effectively about dealing with the wage bills. Kenyans are talking about issues around debt and debt management, and even the president actually occasionally talks about them. But every time he takes action, it tends to be the exact opposite. It tends to be totally underwhelming, and in fact, it tends to be contrary to what he says in public, even in terms of what he actually wants. And I am of the opinion that if the president has been honest about this runaway public bill, both at national and at county level, Kenya has some of the best expertise globally in these areas, in areas of economics, in areas of finance, in areas of public administration, very highly qualified individuals who've worked at the helm of some of the best institutions on earth. If the president goes to recycle somebody that Okia Omtata sent home, is lack of imagination, but it's also lack of seriousness on the most important things that affect us as Kenyans.
Yes.
And yes, that the president can even have the courage to forward Dr. Ben Chumo's nomination to Parliament is actually as part on the face of Kenyans.
Now, Dr. Jong, let's not talk about whether this individual qualifies or not qualifies for this position. Let's talk about the wage bill of this country. And it stands at 53% apparently of the national budget and uses 55% of the country's revenue collection. Apparently, the standard for sub-Saharan Africa is supposed to be just 34%. Kenya is at 54%. I mean, whoever is going to take up this position, he has already his work cut out for him, right?
It's a huge work. It's going to be very difficult. I hope the parliamentarians don't try to cut deals that for us to pass your name, you need to also consider our salary increment. The issue is, as Professor have said, and I agree with him, it's a governance issue. High wage bill is simply a governance issue. Runaway corruption is simply a governance issue. We have poor governance. Professor Koto Gendo wrote a book about constitution without constitutionalism. That is where we are. We have the letters, we have the chapters, we have the constitution, but there's no constitutionalism in Kenya. And so the spirit of the constitution is not there. We only have the pages to turn around and look at. Because if you look at where we are, the seriousness that is needed, you can see that one of the coping mechanisms that some of my colleagues have is to just lower their expectation. So it's good if once in a while you are inspired and surprised, but the expectation is very low because we have serious problem of governance.
Now, Ruth, at the moment, members of parliament are planning to increase their salaries, and they're also forcing the Public Service Commission to engage the SRC to undo the pay cut, effected by the SRC team last year before the general election. Do you think whoever's going to take up this position needs to have some sort of a thick skin?
Definitely. Whoever is taking over this position needs to have a thick skin, because parliamentarians are parliamentarians as we know them. They make promises of how they're going to come up with development agenda for this country and how, basically they're going to reduce their own salaries. They even speak of reducing their own salaries and making promises during the campaign period. And then when they get into office, the tune changes. Every other time we see them getting into parliament and deciding that the salaries are going to increase, and there is nobody who's going to check, and no one is going to speak of, we are not going to have any check and balances against the parliamentarian salaries. So, and you know that once they have voted in parliament and they have passed a motion to increase their salaries, that simply becomes it. SRC in the past has seemed to have lost the power to be able to say that, you know what, in as much as you're voting to increase your salaries, we are putting our foot down and saying that you're not increasing your salaries and we are capping your salaries to a certain level. So in the past, we have seen SRC having a difficult time. During Sarah Serem's reign, she had a very difficult time being able to just put her foot down and saying that, you know what, salaries are not going to increase, and these are the agreed upon ratios that parliamentarians should be able to comply with and be satisfied with. So I think Ben Chumo, if he's approved by I think it's the National Assembly Committee on Finance and National Planning, he definitely will need to have a thick skin to tame the parliamentarians.
And Professor Alfred, as we wrap up, the required standard of a wage bill in any country in sub-Saharan Africa is 34%. As I've already mentioned, Kenya stands at 53%. We're taking about 55% of the country's revenue collection to pay about 700,000 employees. So do you think it's practical to bring these percentages down?
It is practical, and it can be done, but it requires a level of resolve and seriousness that is even more serious than the speaking truth to power that we were talking about earlier on in Kajuju's appointment. What are we saying? We're saying that the numbers of employees that we have in public service is just too big, it's too bloated. We know why that cannot be rationalized. After the new constitution came in, what we did was that we just layered more employees on the existing systems and structures. SRC was to actually advise. One of the things it's meant to do is to advise government on the nature, the quality, and the size of public service, in addition to harmonizing the salaries and remuneration, as it were. Sarah Serem started on a good note. I think 2013 she came with some attempts to harmonize, and then she was her efforts was scuttled by Parliament, and she never recovered again. And we don't know what that commission has actually been doing in terms of radically changing our development trajectory. Meanwhile, the problem has been worsened because in the counties, they found an intact, the governors found an intact civil service running. And because of issues around sacking these people and so on, they just employed a parallel one. So we have a very inefficient civil service, as it were. It is very bloated, and it's actually very costly. So it requires somebody who understands how the public sector works. Then the person who can advise both national and county government in terms of how to make these more efficient, and then eventually start, issues of harmonization and so on. It requires very tough leadership.
Yes.
And that's why I was saying that I don't think somebody of the caliber.
Yes, Prof. I think you've delivered your point of view there. Let me give Dr. Ojwang just a minute. Let me give you the last word here.
Yes, thank you. I think that our wage bill is outrageous. As a country, you know that the number of youth without employment is huge. The same people that probably should be innovative and retire, or innovative and find other jobs, have hogged all the public jobs, and they are there telling our youths, go find a way of employing yourself. Now, if you find somebody who is a professor seeking employment from public as a member of parliament, as a senator, and then telling a youth who have just graduated with a bachelor, you go be innovative and find a way of employing yourself, don't disturb me kind of thing, we really need to care about sharing the prosperity, especially across the ages between the old, the young, and
the young. Thank you.
The rest.
Thank
but
you, Dr.
to me, it's not a matter of age.
Yes.
Simply, it's not a matter of so-and-so is old or so-and-so is young, but it's as a principle, it's important that when we are pushing the youth, go employ yourself, we also remind ourselves and these professors who are seeking public appointment that you also need to have started and walk the talk.
Thank you, Dr. Ojwang, for your input. Dr. Duncan Ojwang is a lecturer at Nazarene University. Professor Alfred Omenya is the CEO of EcoBuild Africa. Ruth Bongo is the founder, Young Kenya Women Leaders. Many thanks for your input. Of course, that discussion comes at a time when the president made those appointments today. He did, actually not appointments, he did nominate former Kenya Power CEO Ben Chumo for appointment as SRC chair. And then former Meru Woman Representative Florence Kajuju, Washington Opio, and Lucy Ndungu as members of the Commission on Administrative Justice, well known as the Office of the Ombudsman. And that is where we bring the show to the end. Many thanks for watching. My name is Joseph Ibrahim. That has been the big story tonight. Up next is KTN Prime with Ben Kitele. Bye-bye.